Sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest ripple effects. On a cold November night, a single mother found herself stranded on the side of the road. Unaware that the stranger who stopped to help her was none other than basketball superstar Ryan Carter. What started as a simple good deed turned into a life-changing journey, one that would impact not only her but also her young son in ways she never imagined. Get ready for a heartwarming story about generosity, hope, and the connections that bring us together. Subscribe to Life Stories to begin today's journey. It was one of those nights that made you wish you had stayed home. The Chicago air had a sharp bite to it, the kind that seeped through even the thickest coats and wrapped around your bones. The streets were eerily quiet, save for the occasional car that sped by, leaving nothing but a trail of fading red taillights. Ryan Carter had just finished an intense practice session with the Chicago Titans. His body ached, his muscles screamed for rest, but his mind was still restless. Nights like these, he preferred to take the quieter roads home, away from the traffic and the flashing cameras. Despite his fame, he had never grown fond of the attention. He wasn't the kind of man who sought the limelight off the court. There was something comforting about the solitude of a winding suburban road. The soft hum of the radio, and the rhythmic flicker of streetlights as he drove past. But that night, something pulled him from the comfort of his routine. Up ahead, just past the bend, he saw a woman standing beside a car with its hood open. Thick steam rising into the cold night air. She was waving hesitantly, as if unsure whether to ask for help or resign herself to being ignored. Most cars sped past her without slowing down. It was, after all, a bad part of town to be stranded in at this hour. Ryan could have kept driving. He had every reason to. He was exhausted. His legs felt like lead, and a warm bed was calling his name. But something deep in his chest told him he couldn't just leave her there. He slowed down, rolling down his window as he pulled up beside her. "Hey, need some help?" he asked. His voice calm, reassuring. The woman turned to him, her face illuminated by the soft glow of his headlights. She was shivering, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, her breath visible in the freezing air. There was exhaustion in her eyes, but also a quiet resilience, like someone who had been through too much to break now. She hesitated for just a moment before nodding. Yeah, I think so," she said, her voice carrying the weight of the long night she'd had. "My car just died on me, and I can't get any signal out here to call for help." Ryan stepped out of his car, immediately feeling the chill wrap around him. "Let's take a look," he said, peering under the hood. He wasn't a mechanic, and he knew it, but it felt like the right thing to do. After a few minutes of fiddling with the engine, he let out a small sigh. "I hate to say it, but I don't think this is something we can fix right here," he admitted, rubbing his hands together for warmth. The woman exhaled sharply, frustration flickering across her face. "Great," she muttered under her breath. "Just my luck." Ryan leaned against the car, studying her for a moment. "Look," he said, "I can give you a ride home. We'll figure out the car later." She hesitated again, her eyes scanning his face as if trying to decide whether to trust him. It was clear she wasn't the type to accept help easily. Life had probably taught her that kindness often came with a price. But something about him must have reassured her, because after a few beats, she nodded. "All right," she said quietly. "I live about 15 minutes from here." She grabbed her groceries from the passenger seat, locked the car, and followed him to his car. As soon as she slid into the passenger seat, Ryan turned up the heater. "It's freezing out there," he remarked, glancing over at her. "Tell me about it," she muttered, rubbing her hands together. For the first few minutes, they drove in silence, the only sounds coming from the soft jazz playing through the speakers. But then, almost out of necessity, the conversation started to flow. "What's your name?" he asked. "Jessica," she said. "And you?" "Ryan." She gave a small nod, but there was no sign of recognition in her face. That was rare. Most people knew who he was. It was refreshing. "You had a long night?" he asked, noting the tiredness in her voice. Jessica let out a humorless laugh. "You could say that. I was just picking up groceries after work. Single mom life. You know, you do what you have to do." Ryan glanced at her, There was something in her tone that reminded him of his own mother, strong, independent, unwilling to let life wear her down. How old is your kid? He asked. 7, she said, a warmth creeping into her voice despite the exhaustion. Ethan. He's obsessed with basketball. Every night, he's outside, pretending he's hitting the game-winning shot. Ryan grinned. Sounds like a future star in the making. Jessica chuckled. Yeah, if he ever actually listens to me when I tell him to do his homework first. Ryan laughed. That's part of the deal. Though, right? You can't love basketball without being just a little stubborn. She smiled for the first time that night. I suppose. When they finally pulled up to her house, she let out a deep breath, as if the weight of the night was finally lifting. Thank you, Ryan, she said sincerely. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't stopped. Don't mention it, he said. But before she stepped out, he reached into his pocket and handed her a small card with his number on it. Let me know what happens with your car. If you need anything, I'll see if I can help. Jessica hesitated before taking it, nodding once. I appreciate it, really. As she disappeared into the house, Ryan sat in his car for a moment, staring at the darkened windows. Something about the encounter lingered in his mind. He had stopped simply because it was the right thing to do. But something told him that this moment, this small act of kindness, would matter more than either of them could have imagined. The following morning, Ryan Carter woke up to the usual routine, early morning workouts, team meetings, and media obligations, but his mind kept drifting back to the woman from last night. Jessica. There was something about her, her quiet strength, the way she carried exhaustion on her shoulders but refused to let it break her. He had met thousands of people over the years, fans who cheered his name, reporters who analyzed his every move, even strangers who recognized him in coffee shops and airports. But Jessica had been different. She hadn't known who he was. Or if she did, she hadn't let it change the way she spoke to him. That kind of sincerity was rare. Later that afternoon, between training sessions, Ryan made a quick phone call to a mechanic shop he trusted. He didn't know much about cars, but he knew that being stranded on the side of the road in freezing weather was the last thing a single mother needed. I need a tow truck sent out to pick up a car, he told the shop owner, giving him the location where Jessica had broken down. And whatever repairs it needs, just take care of it. I'll cover the cost. The mechanic hesitated. You sure about that? Yeah, Ryan said without thinking twice. Just let me know when it's done. The next morning, Jessica woke up to a phone call. Half asleep, she groggily answered. Hello? Good morning, ma'am. This is Tony from Westside Auto. We've got your car here at the shop. Jessica sat up, rubbing her eyes. Wait, what? How? A tow truck brought it in yesterday. Said the bill's already been taken care of. She froze. Her thoughts immediately went to one person. Ryan. She barely knew him, yet he had done something most people wouldn't even consider. Not only had he stopped to help her on the side of the road, but he had gone the extra mile, literally. Jessica's eyes welled up with unexpected emotion. It had been a long time since someone had done something purely out of kindness for her. She had spent years being the one who had to figure everything out alone. The one who had to be strong for Ethan. People always said they wanted to help, but when the time came, their words rarely turned into actions. Ryan had taken action. She grabbed her phone, staring at the card he had given her. For a few moments, she debated whether to call. Would she sound too emotional? Would she come off as ungrateful? Before she could second-guess herself, she hit the call button. It rang twice before she heard his voice. Hello? Jessica took a breath. Ryan. She hesitated, feeling her throat tighten. I don't even know what to say. You don't have to say anything, he said, his voice easy and warm. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. Jessica let out a small, shaky laugh. I think, okay, is an understatement. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she had to do everything on her own. And that feeling, it meant everything. Jessica sat at her kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. But the warmth did little to settle the emotions stirring inside her. She had spent years learning to be independent, not expecting help from anyone. Life had taught her that kindness often came with conditions. That generosity was rarely free. But Ryan Carter had changed that perception. She still couldn't wrap her head around the fact that he had not only stopped to help her that night but had also gone out of his way to fix her car, without expecting anything in return. Ethan came bounding into the kitchen, still in his pajamas, dribbling an invisible basketball as he mimicked a game-winning shot. "Mom, guess what?" he announced proudly. "Coach said if I keep practicing, I might get to start next season." Jessica smiled, ruffling his hair. "That's amazing, buddy. I'm so proud of you." Ethan beamed. "And one day, I'm gonna play for the Titans. Just like Ryan Carter." At his words, Jessica nearly choked on her coffee. She glanced at Ethan, her heart pounding. "What did you say?" Ethan gave her a confused look. "Ryan Carter, Mom. He's my favorite player. He's the best. You don't know him?" Jessica felt her breath hitch. Oh my God. She had spent an entire car ride with one of the most famous basketball players in the country and had no idea. The same man who had gone out of his way to help her, who had fixed her car without hesitation, was the very person her son idolized. Ethan kept rambling about his favorite moments from the season, completely oblivious to his mother's shock. Jessica, however, sat frozen, her mind racing back to their conversation in the car. Ryan had asked about Ethan's love for basketball. He had listened with genuine interest, never once letting on who he really was. She suddenly felt foolish. Reaching for her phone, she stared at Ryan's number. Should she call him? What would she even say? Taking a deep breath, she pressed the call button. Ryan answered almost immediately. "Hey, Jessica, everything all right?" She let out a small laugh, still processing everything. "Ryan, I just found out who you are." There was a beat of silence before he chuckled. "Took you long enough." Jessica groaned, covering her face with one hand. "I can't believe I didn't recognize you. You were a little preoccupied with the whole, stranded on the side of the road, thing," he teased. She exhaled, shaking her head. I don't know what to say. I mean, why didn't you tell me?" Ryan's voice softened. "Because it didn't matter. I wasn't helping you as Ryan Carter, the basketball player. I was just helping you as me." Jessica felt something shift in her heart. This man, who had everything, fame, wealth, the adoration of millions, had chosen to be humble, to be kind, simply because it was the right thing to do. And in that moment, she realized something else. This wasn't just an act of generosity. This was the kind of kindness that changed lives. Months passed, but the encounter with Ryan Carter continued to ripple through Jessica's life in ways she never could have imagined. What had started as a simple act of kindness had become a defining moment, not just for her, but for Ethan as well. True to his word, Ryan invited them to a Chicago Titans game. Jessica watched as her son, wide-eyed and full of excitement, sat courtside, absorbing every second of the experience. But the real magic happened after the game, when Ryan called Ethan onto the court. "All right, let's see that game-winning shot you keep practicing," Ryan said, tossing him a basketball. Ethan, almost trembling with excitement, took the shot. The ball swished cleanly through the net. Ryan grinned and gave the boy a high five. And in that moment, Jessica saw something shift in her son. This wasn't just about basketball anymore. It was about believing that good things could happen. That dreams weren't just distant fantasies, they could be real. But what Jessica hadn't expected was how much her own life would change. Inspired by Ryan's generosity, she started volunteering with organizations that helped single mothers and struggling families. She shared her story, not to gain sympathy, but to remind people that kindness had the power to change lives. One evening, as she was preparing dinner, she got a call from Ryan's team. "We'd love for you to speak at an event about the impact of community support." The voice on the other end said. Jessica smiled. "I'd love to. Because kindness doesn't just stop at one act. It moves forward, growing, reaching places we never expect." Thank you for watching. Subscribe to Life Stories for more inspiring videos.